They called him Lying Randall, a quiet, peculiar man from Pearisburg, Virginia, a small town with quiet streets and long memories. To most folks, Randall Lee Smith was just a drifter, a loner who wandered the Appalachian Trail for days at a time, sometimes vanishing for weeks. He would show up again thin, sunburned, smiling like nothing ever happened. He was strange, sure, but not dangerous. That's what they thought. Until the spring of 1981. Two social workers from Maine, Susan Ramsey and Robert Mountford, were hiking the Appalachian Trail to raise money for mental health charities. It was a noble journey through one of the most beautiful yet unforgiving regions of America. They were last seen near the Wapiti shelter, a small, rustic lean-to deep in the woods, a place meant to offer rest, safety, but on that night, it became something else entirely. When Susan and Robert failed to show up to meet fellow hiker as planned, the alarm was raised. Deputies combed the trail. At first, nothing, just endless trees and silence. Then they found it. A bloodstain on the shelter's floorboards, a disturbed patch of leaves, a buried sleeping bag. Inside was the body of Susan Ramsey, stabbed, beaten, her final moments hidden beneath the very soil she hiked to inspire hope. Nearby, they found Robert Mountford, a single gunshot to the head, executed. And near their graves, a paperback book. Inside the book, fingerprints that didn't belong to either victim. They belonged to Randall Lee Smith. Police raided his home in Pearisburg. What they found chilled them to the bone. Bloody clothes, stolen items from victims, disturbing homemade instruments, and a handwritten note claiming he had been kidnapped. The handwriting matched his own, but Randall was already gone, vanished into the Appalachian wilderness he knew better than anyone else. Weeks passed, then months, until, by eerie coincidence, the lead investigator, Sheriff Tom Lawson, got a call while vacationing hundreds of miles away on Myrtle Beach. A man had been picked up wandering the streets, covered in bug bites, disorientated. He said he didn't know his name, said he had amnesia, but when they handed him a form to sign for medical treatment, he wrote, Randall Lee Smith. He was brought back to Virginia in shackles, but despite the brutality of his crimes, Randall never faced the death penalty. He took a plea deal, 30 years in prison. He served half, 15. Then in 1996, he walked free. A convicted double murderer released in the very same town where his victims had once hiked in peace. Locals avoided him, hikers whispered his name in fear, but Randall, he went back to the trail, back to the woods. Some said they saw him talking to campers, smiling, polite. No one recognized the danger. Time passed, people forgot, but the mountain didn't. May 2008, two fishermen, Scott Johnson and Sean Farmer, were both camping near Bushy Mountain, just a couple of guys sharing trout and beer in the heart of the forest. That's when a man emerged from the trees, thin, pale, accompanied by a starving dog. He called himself Ricky Williams, claimed he was a NASA scientist, married to a beauty queen, said he'd been lost in the woods for weeks. Scott and Sean knew he was lying, but in the Appalachian tradition, they offered him a meal, a place by the fire, a bit of kindness. He ate in silence, then stood to leave, and then he turned and opened fire. 4 shots. Sean took one to the head, Scott in the neck, then Sean again in the chest, Scott in the back. Somehow they ran, stumbling, bleeding, vanishing into the dark woods as Randall watched from the edge of the firelight. But the killer had made a mistake. He was out of bullets. Sean reached his truck, drove with a bullet in his skull, found Scott on the road, who'd somehow survived too. They reached the farmhouse, hammered on the door. A woman inside screamed for her son to call 911. When the police arrived, one of the young men, still bleeding, barely conscious, pointed to a missing poster. "It's him," he whispered. "That's the man who shot us. Randall Lee Smith." Hours later, a Virginia state trooper spotted Scott's stolen truck speeding down a mountain road. It crashed, flipped. Randall was inside, unconscious, trapped, his pistol just out of reach. He was taken to the same hospital as the two men he tried to murder. When he woke, he claimed self-defense. Of course, no one believed him. A few days later, a corrections officer brought Randall his dinner tray. He didn't respond. They found him collapsed on the floor of his cell. No injuries, no wounds, no signs of struggle. Randall Lee Smith, a man who had killed without reason, without remorse, had simply stopped living. Some say it was natural causes. Others say he lost the will to exist once the thrill of hunting was gone. He was buried next to his mother. The only soul to attend the graveside service was his dog, Lou. But what's truly horrifying about Randall Lee Smith isn't what he did. It's why he did it. There was no motive, no robbery, no grudge. The hikers he killed in 1981? Strangers. The fishermen in 2008? They fed him, showed him kindness, and he still tried to end their lives. Because Randall didn't kill for gain, he killed for pleasure. He didn't need a reason, he was the reason. And sometimes, in the Appalachian dark, where cell surface fails and the trees stretch for miles, people like Randall are still out there, smiling, friendly, waiting for the fire to die down and watching you fall to sleep. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. I was 26 years old the first time I hiked the Appalachian Trail alone. It was the summer of '89. Before GPS, before cell phones, just me, a compass, and the kind of youthful arrogance that makes you believe nothing can go wrong. Back then, I lived in Rhode Island, a beautiful state, but small, too small. I'd already exhausted every local trail worth hiking, and I wanted something raw, wilder. The Appalachian Trail was a rite of passage among serious hikers. My uncle had done the whole thing back in the 50s and never stopped bragging about it. Made it sound like some sacred pilgrimage. I couldn't get the time off work to do the whole trail, but I figured 2 weeks would be enough to knock out the southern portion, from Harper's Ferry down to the Blue Ridge Mountains, ending in Asherville. That would be my tribute, my challenge. I set out with everything I thought I'd need: food, a map, and a lightweight hammock. Something I could string up between trees to keep me off the ground at night. Safer from the bugs, the damp, or so I thought. The first few days were brutal. Long hikes, blistering heat, and an exhaustion that reached down into my bones. But the solitude, that was the real reward. There's something almost spiritual about walking alone through endless trees. Like the forest knows secrets it only whispers when you're quiet enough to listen. Then came that night, the one I don't talk about often, the one I still dream about 30-something years later. It started like any other. I set up my hammock at dusk, somewhere deep in West Virginia, no one around for miles. I remember the quiet, the wrong kind of quiet, not peaceful, but heavy, like the trees were holding their breath. I woke up sometime after midnight to the sound of leaves shifting, not rustling in the wind, footsteps. I shifted slightly, peeking over the edge of the hammock, and I froze. Just beyond the tree line stood a figure, a man, perfectly still, no flashlight, no gear, no expression, just standing there, watching me. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. I didn't think. I rolled out of the hammock and ran. No shoes, no gear, just pure instinct driving my legs into the dark. I must have run 100 yards before I ducked behind a tree, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I waited, listened, no footsteps behind me, no sounds at all. Eventually, I crept back towards my camp. My hands were shaking as I scanned the trees. My gear was untouched. No sign of him. It was like he'd vanished. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he wanted me to come back, that this was part of something, a test, a game. I packed up fast and I hiked through the night until I found a new spot. But after that, I couldn't sleep right. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the leaves, my brain screamed, he's back. I brought fishing line in a small trail town a few days later, set up makeshift tripwires with old tin cans that clattered when touched. Primitive alarms. It gave me some peace of mind. Until one night, a fox set them off and I leapt out with a knife in my hand, only to find it was a curious animal. I laughed it off, but I never slept with the knife again. Too dangerous, too easy to make a fatal mistake in panic. About a week passed. I was 100 miles from that first campsite and started to feel normal again. The paranoia had faded until the night something worse happened. I woke up unable to move. The fabric of my hammock was tight across my chest, my arms pinned to my sides. Something had cocooned me, wrapped the hammock closed with cord or wire. I couldn't breathe right. I couldn't scream. Then I heard it. Leaves dragging. The sound of fabric scraping against dirt. I was being pulled. Someone had cut the hammock down and was dragging me, still inside it, across the forest floor. I panicked, thrashed, screamed, but the material was thick and my voice was muffled. No one could hear me, no one would come, and I had no knife, no flashlight, nothing. Then, I remembered something. My dad had given me an old wristwatch. The clasp had a sharp metal edge, dull, but enough to nick skin if you weren't careful. I twisted my wrist, fumbling with fingers that barely worked, found the latch, pressed it against the fabric, soared. The seconds felt like hours. I heard footsteps behind me, measured and calm. Whoever was dragging me wasn't in a rush. They were enjoying it. But eventually, moonlight. I saw it peeking through the shredded fabric. I tore and ripped until my arm came free, then my chest. Then I burst out of the hammock like something being born again. Cold, screaming and running for my life. I don't know how I escaped. I didn't look back. Eventually, I found a house. Lights on, front porch glowing like salvation. I banged on the door until someone answered. They let me in, called the sheriff, took me in like I was a stray. When the sheriff came the next morning, I told him everything, every awful detail. He nodded slowly, said maybe I had a bad dream, maybe I got tangled and panicked. But I know someone was out there. Someone had tracked me for 100 miles. Someone was waiting, who watched, who dragged me into the dark and wanted to see what happened next. I never finished the trail, took a bus back north and never spoke about it again. Not until years later, when I told my uncle, and he didn't laugh, didn't scoff. He just looked at me for a long time and said, "Some of those mountains don't belong to us. They are places out there the maps don't warn you about, and people who never come back down." Then he said something I'll never forget. "The trees out there, they keep secrets, and they never forget your face." If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. Her trail name was Inchworm, not because she was weak or afraid, but because she moved with purpose, slowly, steadily, 1 mile at a time. Geraldine Largay was 66 years old when she decided to hike the Appalachian Trail. Nearly 1,000 miles of wilderness, starting in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. For many, it was a bucket list challenge. For Geraldine, it was something deeper. She'd been married for over 40 years, a devoted nurse, a woman who had always cared for others. Now, for once, she was doing something for herself. She walked with a close friend, Jane Lee, Her husband, George, followed along in their car, meeting them at intervals to deliver supplies, fresh clothes, or a quick night in a motel. For weeks, it went perfectly. Then Jane had to leave the trail unexpectedly, and Geraldine chose to continue alone. Those who knew her would later say she wasn't best with directions, that she sometimes flustered when trails became tricky, but she was determined, stubborn even. Somewhere deep in Maine, in one of the wildest, least forgiving stretches of the trail, Geraldine stepped off the path, maybe to use the bathroom, maybe to scout a shortcut. Whatever the reason, she never found her way back. The forest swallowed her whole. She had no GPS, no way to mark her position, but she had a notebook, small and black, where she documented every day of her journey. Even after she became lost, she kept writing. She texted George, "Lost since yesterday. Off trail 3 or 4 miles. Call please. What do I do?" The messages never sent. There was no signal. Just that cruel little "sending failed" icon blinking over and over in the corner of the screen, as if mocking her. She wrote another text. "In some trouble. Lost. Need help." Again, not delivered. Geraldine did everything right. She didn't panic. She searched for high ground. She tied a silver blanket between 2 trees to signal rescue teams. She rationed her food. She waited, but help never came, and no one saw her. Rescue teams flooded the areas, helicopters, search dogs, trail crews, but they never saw the silver blanket. The forest canopy was too dense. Her campsite, tucked between fir trees and underbrush, was invisible from the sky. Volunteers passed within a mile of her location, likely closer, and never realized it. She was right there, and yet utterly alone. False tips began to pour in. Psychics claimed she'd been kidnapped. Some said she drowned. Others accused George of foul play. Time was wasted. Focus was lost. Meanwhile, Geraldine was dying, not in a single violent moment, but in slow increments, a little colder each night, a little weaker each morning, a little more invisible. Her final journal entries were clear and heartbreakingly calm. "When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Kerry. It will be the greatest kindness. Let them know I am dead and where you found me." She had waited 26 days, alone, cold, hope flickering like the last light in the long hallway. When her body was finally discovered, 2 years later, she was still inside her sleeping bag. The campsite was pristine. Her belongings were neatly arranged. There was no sign of panic, no violence, no chaos. She had died as she lived, orderly, quiet, dignified, and utterly unseen. People like to imagine the wild is tamed now, that with GPS and cell towers and satellites overhead, no one can simply disappear. But Geraldine Largay did. In one of the most hiked trails in America, in a country that prides itself on never losing people, and the part that stays with me the most, she was less than a mile from rescue, close enough to hear footsteps, close enough that searchers might have unknowingly passed her by, their eyes facing forward, never looking to the side. She was there. The forest knew. It just didn't tell. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others, hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. I grew up in North Carolina. Back when I was a kid, I was a Boy Scout. Back when that still meant campfires, rope knots and memorizing how to read moss on trees. We'll go on hikes, learn survival skills, fish in cold rivers, and sleep under the stars without ever worrying about what might be sleeping beside us. At least, most of the time. There was one summer trip deep in the Smoky Mountains that I'll never forget, and not because of the views or the s'mores, but because something out there watched us that night, and I still don't know if it was real. It was the third night of our week-long campout. We were huddled around a fire, the air thick with smoke and mosquito repellent, when one of our scoutmasters, an old mountain guy named Ray, decided to tell us a local legend. "You boys ever heard of Spearfinger?" He had our attention. "She walks these mountains," he said. "Older stones, skin like granite, one long, sharp finger on her right hand, sharp enough to stab clean through a tree or a person, doesn't matter." Ray's voice dropped to a whisper. "She takes the shape of your loved ones, your grandma, your favourite aunt, the kind of voice that sings you to sleep, right before she slides that finger between your ribs and pulls out your liver." A few of the younger kids giggled nervously. "Cherokee legends say her heart's hidden in the palm of her hand, so no weapon can kill her. She walks at dusk, alone, and if the birds go silent in the trees, it means she's close." We laughed it off, like you do when you're 13 and pretending to be tough. But something about that story clung to me. That image of a silent, stone-skinned woman drifting through the pines, pretending to be your family, singing lullabies with bloody lips. It got in my head. That night, after lights out, I lay in my tent wide awake, listening. Every branch that snapped outside made me flinch. I whispered to my tent mate, but he was already snoring. Then I heard it. A hiss. Soft, like wind through dry leaves, but slower, more intentional. And then I saw it. A silhouette moved outside the tent, tall and thin. It didn't shuffle like a raccoon or skitter like a fox. It walked. Human-shaped. It paused, raised an arm. I saw one long, pointed finger touch the side of the tent, tracing the fabric in slow circles. Then it whispered, "Huelasiko," the Cherokee word for liver. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. My entire body locked up like stone. Then, the zipper. It started to slide open. That snapped something inside me. I screamed so loud I thought my lungs would burst. I crashed through the flap of the tent, tore into the darkness, screaming that Spearfinger had come to eat us alive. I expected chaos, screams, tents flying open, panic everywhere, but all I heard was laughter. One of the older scouts, Devin, was on the ground, red-faced and wheezing, holding up a stick taped to his finger like some makeshift monster claw. He'd snuck around while we were sleeping. He even learned the Cherokee phrase from a book in the ranger station. It was all just a prank. At least, that's what I told myself. That's what we all told ourselves. But here's the part I never shared. Later that night, when the fire had burned down to coals, I went to grab my flashlight from the edge of the camp. That's when I heard it again, just once, behind me in the trees. The same whisper, "Huele seco." I turned. No one was there. Devin was still in his tent, and above me, every bird in the canopy had gone silent. Some things in the mountains don't care if you believe in them. They've been watching far longer than we've been telling stories, and sometimes they listen. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. My name is Lena. I'm from Malaysia, and the moment I thought I was going to die was in Virginia. It happened during a summer school program at Virginia Tech. There were field trips every weekend, and one afternoon, a small group of us hiked part of the Appalachian Trail with a local guide. We were told it was a beginner route, nothing dangerous, just scenery and silence. We didn't know silence could be dangerous. It was stiffingly hot, no wind, the kind of heat that makes your clothes stick and your mind drift. We hiked for hours, stopping occasionally to catch our breath, drink lukewarm water, or snap a few photos of the trees. At one point, we sat on a log, sharing snacks, crackers, fruit, bits of trail mix. That's when we heard it, a low rustling in the brush just a few yards off the trail. I looked at our guide. This man had been cocky and cheerful all afternoon, and saw his face drain of colour. "Don't move," he whispered. "Don't make a sound." I froze. The brush parted, and something stepped out. A black bear, full grown, muscular, silent. It didn't roar, didn't charge, it just walked into our clearing, like it had always been there, like we were the visitors. It sniffed the air once, then turned directly towards me. Time fractured. I remember the bear walking, slow, deliberate, right up to where I sat. I remember the sweat beading on my skin, not from the heat anymore, but from the sheer terror. And I remember how it rose onto its hind legs. It towered above me. It looked into me. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My mind screamed, but my body had locked up. It sniffed at my hijab. Closer, closer. I could feel its breath on my face, hot and wild and ancient. It could have ended me right there, but it didn't. It lowered itself back to all fours, moved on to my friend, Sol. She had frozen too, mouth trembling, holding a half-eaten sandwich in one hand. She let it fall. The bear sniffed the food, ignored it, then stood up again, right in front of her, snuffling at her face and neck. For a moment, it looked like it might, but then it turned, walked back into the forest as quietly as it had come. The silence that followed was unbearable. Pardon the pun. No one spoke, no one moved. The only sound was my pulse hammering in my ears and the faintest whisper of leaves rustling where the bear had vanished. We didn't cheer, we didn't breathe easy. We just slowly, nimbly packed our things and followed the guide back to the trailhead. I don't remember the hike back. I only remember what the guide said once we reached the van. "It didn't see us as a threat or a meal. We were lucky. That's all it ever is out here. Just luck." People don't realise how quiet death can be, how slowly it can walk right up to you. No growling, no violence, just the sense that you've lost control, that something bigger, older, and far less emotional now decides what happens to you. That day, the bear chose not to kill us, and I still don't know why. The Appalachian Trail stretches for over 2,000 miles, but the real distance is measured in the stories people leave behind. Some come back with photos and memories, others don't come back at all. If these stories haunted you like they did me, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which one disturbed you the most. And if you want more tales of real life horror, strange disappearances and forgotten legends, subscribe to Blighty Nightmares, where darkness walks on two legs and the wild still whispers. I'll be waiting.